Look at this guy, messy and lazy. Is this the face of a core systems engineer? Genevieve Sinclair sneered. Xavier Thorne stood up, his broad shoulders shaking from tiredness. I've been here since 10:15 p.m. to rewrite the multithreading process. I don't pay for your $1,000 naps. Go back to your hole. She nodded to the security guards. Not one of 35 engineers dared to say a word. Xavier walked to the elevator, holding the picture of his daughter Brianna tight. He was kicked out at 9:07 a.m., just 24 minutes after he pushed the patch live at 8:43 a.m. Genevieve thought she was keeping iron discipline, but she just fired the only person who saved her job from a $187.42 million crash. To understand why that firing happened, we need to go back 11 days. We need to see the quiet life Xavier built before that Tuesday morning turned it upside down. His alarm buzzed at 5:31 a.m. in a small rented apartment near Fruitvale Station in Oakland. Xavier rolled out of bed before the second beep. The floor was cold under his bare feet. Down the hall, a cartoon played softly on low volume. His daughter Brianna was already awake. She was 7 years old, with tight curls she liked to twist around one finger while she thought. Xavier packed her lunch first. Turkey sandwich, cut into 4 triangles. Apple slices, no seeds. He brushed her hair while she ate cereal, careful with the tangles near her neck. "Daddy, my toy horse has a crack," she said, holding up a small plastic figure. He looked at it for 2 seconds. "We'll fix it tonight," he told her. She smiled and tucked the horse back into her backpack pocket. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and cheap coffee, warm and familiar in the small space. A bus rumbled past outside, rattling the window glass just slightly. Xavier grabbed his backpack and her lunchbox, and they walked out the door together. Morning fog sat low over the street, cool and damp against his face. Brianna hummed a tune from her cartoon show, swinging her lunchbox as they walked. He held her small hand tight until the school gate came into view. He dropped her at school by 7:15 a.m. and caught the BART train toward San Francisco. The train rattled under the bay, packed with tired commuters holding coffee cups. Xavier stood near the door, one hand on the rail, thinking through the day's tasks in his head. His face was sharp and strong, a square jaw under a neatly trimmed beard. His shoulders were broad, from years of weekend basketball at the local park. But his clothes told a different story. Faded gray hoodie, worn sneakers with a small tear near the toe. He never wore a watch or a ring, nothing shiny, nothing loud. His backpack was old too, the zipper sticking halfway most mornings. Strangers on the train rarely gave him a second look. He worked at Etheris Systems, a financial technology company on Montgomery Street. The office sat on the 42nd floor, glass walls catching the morning fog. Xavier's desk was tucked in a corner, no window, right next to a loud air vent that never stopped humming. Most people in that building didn't know his name. They knew his title only. Principal Core Systems Engineer. What they didn't know was that Xavier built the backbone of the company's entire trading engine, a system called Kronos Ledger. Kronos Ledger matched thousands of trades every single second. Banks and hedge funds trusted it, with real money, real futures, real savings. And only one person truly understood every wire running through its core. That person sat by the loud air vent, eating a granola bar at his desk. The vent rattled every few minutes, a low mechanical cough that never fully stopped. Xavier had learned to work around it, the way sailors learn to sleep through waves. His 2 monitors glowed pale blue against the gray cubicle walls. 2 framed diplomas from Stanford sat in a drawer, never hung on the wall. He didn't need anyone to see them. His code spoke for itself, quiet and precise, humming underneath the whole company like a second heartbeat. His boss, Vice President Braden Hayes, barely looked at him in meetings. Braden preferred sharp suits and louder voices, the kind that filled a conference room fast. Quarterly reports listed feature wins under other names. Xavier never corrected anyone. He just kept his head down and kept the system running clean. Coworkers walked past his desk without a nod most mornings. A few knew his first name. Fewer still knew he had 2 patents in parallel computing, earned before most of them had even started their careers. That quiet routine held steady for 3 years. Then, 10 days before the firing, something in the code caught his eye during a routine load test. Xavier was running simulations to prepare for an option settlement date. He noticed a strange delay buried deep in a memory cache. A tiny gap, easy to miss, hiding inside thousands of lines of legacy code. He dug deeper. That night, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. The office had emptied out an hour earlier, leaving only the hum of the vent and the click of his own keys. His pulse ticked up as the pattern became clear. Under heavy trading volume, the system could silently flip a sell order into a buy order. No warning, no red flag on the dashboard. The error hid itself behind a wall of clean, green status lights. Xavier leaned closer to the screen, testing the flaw again and again. Each test confirmed the same terrifying result. A ghost inside the machine, patient and invisible, waiting for the busiest possible moment to strike. If that happened during a busy trading session, the damage would be enormous. Bancroft Asset Management, the firm's largest client, would have their entire portfolio matched wrong. Xavier ran the numbers twice to be sure. The exposure came to exactly $187. $42 million. His hands went cold. He sat back in his chair and stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he opened a blank document and started typing. He wrote a 12-page report, laying out the flaw line by line. He labeled the subject line in red. Urgent, critical flaw threatens $187. $42 million disaster on Kronos Ledger. He sent it straight to CEO Genevieve Sinclair's office at 11:52 p.m. Would anyone even open it before it was too late? That question sat heavy in Xavier's chest as he finally drove home that night. The next morning, nothing happened. Genevieve's assistant scanned the subject line, then archived the email without a second glance. Genevieve had given clear orders. No technical reports during merger week. She wanted every ounce of focus on the coming Ethers acquisition deal. Xavier tried again through the proper channel. He walked to CTO Dominic Ward's office and knocked twice. Dominic was on a call with investors, phone pressed to his ear, papers scattered across his desk. Xavier, stick to your sprint tickets, Dominic said, waving him off. Don't stir up drama before the merger closes. The door almost closed itself as Xavier stepped back into the hallway. Fluorescent light buzzed overhead in the empty corridor. Xavier stood there a moment, jaw tight, throat dry. A knot pulled hard in his stomach. His fingers curled little by little into a fist at his side. He thought about rent due on the first of the month. He thought about Brianna's asthma inhaler, the one covered only through his company insurance. He was a single father raising a 7-year-old girl alone. He could not risk losing this job. He remembered the day his wife passed, 2 years back now, quiet and sudden. Since then, it had only ever been the two of them. Brianna's laugh was the one thing that could still steady him. He pulled out his phone and looked at a photo of her, taken just last weekend at the park. She was laughing, both hands raised high above her head. He smiled at the small screen for a long moment before he put it away. Other engineers walked past him in the hallway, laughing about something unrelated. None of them noticed the 12-page report still clutched in his hand. He folded it little by little and slid it into his backpack. A quiet voice in his head whispered an easy way out. The system had run fine for 3 years. Maybe the crash would never actually come. Maybe silence was the safer choice tonight. He carried that heavy question home, with him, unresolved and gnawing at his chest. That Wednesday evening, Xavier sat at the kitchen table with Brianna eating spaghetti from mismatched bowls. She held up her plastic horse again, the crack running along its front leg. Daddy, if the little gear inside is broken, and nobody fixes it, she said, then when it spins fast, the whole toy breaks apart. Right? She said it, so simply, chewing her food between words. Xavier froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Her question landed somewhere deep inside him. He thought of his late father, a shipyard welder in Oakland for 31 years. His father used to say something Xavier had never forgotten. A real tradesman never lets a crack ride out to sea. His father's rough voice echoed in his memory, steady and certain. Xavier set his fork down little by little. He thought about the ordinary people who trusted Bancroft with their retirement money. Teachers, nurses, bus drivers, people who worked their whole lives and never once thought about a hidden flaw in some trading engine. He carried Brianna to bed a few minutes later, her small body already heavy with sleep. He tucked the cracked plastic horse beside her pillow, just like he promised. Standing in the doorway, he watched her breathe, slow and steady. His father's voice returned to him one more time, that night, worn smooth by memory. 31 years at the shipyard, and not one crack ever slipped past him. Xavier closed the bedroom door softly behind him. Something settled in him. That night, calm and unshakable. He would fix this himself, whatever the cost to his career. He sat at the kitchen table long, after Brianna fell asleep, sketching a rough plan on a paper napkin. 2 nights later, at exactly 10:15 p.m., his phone buzzed with a soft red alert. Latency was climbing on Kronos Ledger. The flaw was waking up early, stirred by a wave of overnight orders queued for the morning session. Xavier called his neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, and asked her to watch Brianna for the night. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed for his old sedan, its engine coughing twice before catching. Thick fog rolled across the Bay Bridge as he drove toward the city. His headlights cut 2 narrow beams through the gray mist. His hands gripped the wheel tight, knuckles pale under the dashboard light. The radio played low static, some late-night talk show fading in and out. Streetlights blurred past in orange streaks against the wet windshield. Xavier's mind ran through the broken code, line by line, even as he drove. He badged into the empty Ethers building at 10:45 p.m. The lobby sat silent, marble floor gleaming under dim security lights. A lone guard nodded at him from behind the front desk, barely looking up from his phone. The 42nd floor sat dark except for motion sensor lights flickering on as he walked. His footsteps echoed down the empty row of cubicles. Xavier dropped into his chair, cracked his knuckles, and opened a terminal window. The air vent above his desk clicked on, right on schedule. He almost smiled at the familiar sound. This was no longer a report nobody would read. This was a war against broken code, fought alone in the middle of the night. Around midnight, a message popped up on his screen. Tasha Higgins, a 24-year-old engineer 3 months into the job, had noticed his account active on the internal system. "Everything okay?" she typed. Instead of telling her to go to sleep, Xavier explained the flaw in plain terms. He asked her to monitor a few remote connection ports and flag anything strange. Tasha became his eyes on the other side of the network. The bug ran deep, tangled through 40,000 lines of legacy code written years before Xavier ever joined the company. He would need to rebuild the entire multi-threading system from scratch, piece by piece. Tasha kept sending updates every 20 minutes or so, short and sharp. "Port 4 looks clean. Still steady on my end." Her messages gave Xavier strange comfort, proof that he wasn't fighting this thing fully alone. Tasha had only worked at Ethers for 3 months. Nobody senior ever asked her opinion on anything. But tonight, Xavier trusted her more than anyone else in the building, awake or asleep. "You're good at this," Xavier typed back once between fixes. "Better than you think." A small reply came seconds later, just 3 words. "Thank you, Xavier." He worked through old comments left by engineers who had left the company years earlier. Some notes made no sense anymore. Others revealed small traps buried inside the logic, left behind like landmines in a field. By 3:15 a.m., tiredness pressed hard against his eyes. His 4th cup of coffee sat cold beside his keyboard, untouched for an hour. His shoulders ached. The screen blurred slightly every time he blinked too long. Then, at 4:30 a.m., The staging server ran out of memory without warning. 6 straight hours of progress sat one keystroke away from vanishing fully. Xavier's stomach dropped. He typed fast, rerouting data by hand, through an emergency command he hadn't used in years. Sweat beaded along his hairline as the terminal froze, then little by little, painfully, began responding again. The work survived. Barely. Xavier sat back and let out a long, shaky breath. His shirt clung damp to his back. He glanced at the small photo of Brianna propped against his monitor, her gap-toothed smile catching the screen's blue light. Would the rest of the night hold together, or was this only the first crack in a much longer collapse? He pushed the thought aside and got back to work, hands steady again on the keyboard. By 5:30 a.m., Xavier finished rewriting the core logic. But the hardest part still waited ahead of him. He needed to backtest the new patch against 3 full years of Bancroft's trading history, every single transaction. If even one line held a hidden error, the system could report success while quietly corrupting every trade behind the scenes. A silent failure, invisible until the damage was already done. The clock kept climbing toward the 9:30 a.m. market open. Every minute felt shorter than the one before it. Xavier launched the backtest and watched the progress bar begin to crawl forward. At 7:45 a.m., the progress bar hit 98%, then froze fully. The screen stopped responding. Chavis just did not instantly. He sat just right still. For minutes passed like 4 hours. Sweat rolled little by little down his jaw. If the system crashed now, there would be no time left to restore the old code before the market opened. The office around him stayed dead silent. Somewhere down the hall, the air vent clicked and hissed, the only sound in the whole empty floor. Xavier's hands hovered above the keyboard, not moving. His jaw muscles pulled tight beneath his beard. The knuckles on his right hand whitened around the edge of his desk. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding somewhere behind his ears. His mind raced through every command he knew. Then he remembered one he'd built himself, back in a debugging thesis at Stanford years earlier. He typed it in with steady, careful fingers. The screen flickered once, then twice. Green text filled the terminal. Simulation passed. 0 errors. Xavier exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His hands trembled slightly against the keyboard. For a moment, the humming air vent was the loudest sound in the world. At 8:43 a.m., the patch went live across every server in the cluster. Xavier typed one final line into the commit log. Fixed critical multithreading race condition on Kronos Ledger. Deployed live before market open. Thorn. 11 straight hours of work finally caught up to his body all at once. His eyes grew heavy, his shoulders sank into the chair. The office had started filling up around him, phones ringing, keyboards clacking to life. Nobody noticed the man slumped quietly in the corner cubicle. Nobody noticed the screen beside him, still glowing with proof of what he'd just done. At 9:04 a.m., he drifted into sleep, one hand still resting near a small photo of Brianna on his desk. 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor. Genevieve Sinclair walked in, with Braden Hayes trailing behind her, heels clicking sharp against the tile. She spotted Xavier slumped in his chair and marched straight toward him, her face already twisting with disgust. That was the exact moment from the hook. 35 engineers froze at their desks. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Genevieve never once glanced at the glowing screen beside him, the one showing his successful deploy from 24 minutes earlier. A young engineer near the window opened his mouth, then closed it again, saying nothing. Braden Hayes stood behind Genevieve, arms crossed, nodding along with every word she said. Tasha Higgins watched from her desk, her hands frozen over her keyboard. Genevieve's voice sliced through the quiet room, sharp and loud. $1,000 naps, she repeated, glancing around for approval. That never came. Her heels clicked once against the floor as she stepped closer to his desk. Xavier stood tall despite the tiredness pulling at every muscle in his body. He did not argue further. He did not raise his voice. He simply reached for the small photo of Brianna on his desk and held it close. Security walked Xavier to the elevator, his daughter's photo still clutched in his hand. The doors closed at 9:07 a.m. sharp. He stared straight ahead as the numbers ticked down toward the lobby. 23 minutes later, at exactly 9:30 a.m., the market opened for the day. A massive wave of orders poured in from Bancroft, 4 times the normal volume for a Tuesday morning. Every screen in the trading department braced for trouble. But Chronos Ledger ran just right smooth, without a single millisecond of delay. Green numbers scrolled steadily across every monitor on the floor. No red flags, no dilas, no sign of the disaster that had almost swallowed the whole company whole just hours earlier. Tasha Higgins stared at her monitor, unable to process what she'd just watched happen to Xavier. Her hands shook slightly as she picked up her desk phone and dialed CTO Dominic Wardstrait. "You need to come see this," she said, her voice tight and fast. She pointed at Xavier's still glowing screen, and the commit log time stamped 8:43 a.m. Dominic's face went pale as he read each line. He pulled up the old code on a separate machine and ran a backtest of his own. The screen turned a harsh, blinking red. Simulated losses, $201. 15 million. Far worse than anyone had first calculated. Dominic sat frozen at his desk, staring at that number for a long, silent moment. Somewhere in this building, a man had just been thrown out for saving all of it. Word moved fast through the office that morning. Whispers spread from desk to desk, faster than anyone could stop them. Some engineers pulled up the commit log themselves just to see it with their own eyes. But the real reckoning wouldn't happen until Friday, inside a room with a much bigger audience. Would Genevieve even know it was coming? Friday morning, at 8 a.m. sharp, Genevieve Sinclair walked into the emergency board meeting with total trust in herself. She wore a fitted navy dress and carried a slide deck about strong leadership and firm discipline. "We removed a careless employee to protect our culture ahead of the merger," she told the board members, clicking to her next slide. Her voice stayed smooth and certain, practice from years of board presentations. Then Dominic Ward stood up from his seat near the back of the room. He connected his laptop to the 85-inch screen without asking permission. The room went quiet. Line by line, he showed them everything. The 10:15 p.m. login. The urgent email sent 11 days earlier and ignored. The 8:43 a.m. deploy that saved the entire trading system before market open. The building's own security log filled the screen next, time-stamped down to the second. Genevieve had approved that very logging system herself a year earlier. Back then, she bragged to the same board about Total being responsible. Now it recorded every choice she'd made against her. Board members leaned forward, murmuring low to each other. One older man near the end of the table shook his head little by little, shock spreading across his face. A woman across from him covered her mouth with one hand. Genevieve tried to interrupt once. "This is out of context," she said fast. Dominic simply clicked to the next slide and let the timestamps speak for themselves. Genevieve's smile started to fade at the edges. Her fingers tightened little by little around the edge of the table. Then the video call screen lit up with one more face. Garrison Croft, CEO of Bancroft Asset Management, joined the meeting from his office in New York. Croft was a tall, gray-haired man known for saying little and meaning every word. He rarely joined calls himself, sending assistants instead. His presence alone told everyone in the room how serious this had become. "We know exactly why your system ran clean yesterday," Croft said, his voice flat and cold. "A man named Xavier Thorne fixed it, alone, overnight." He paused, letting the silence stretch across the room. "If the man who saved our money gets fired for falling asleep after saving it," Croft continued, "Bancroft pulls every dollar." He paused, and we sue Etheris for careless bad choices. Nobody in the room said a single word. Genevieve's hands trembled beneath the table. Color drained little by little from her face, leaving her skin pale under the boardroom lights. Her, with care built trust in herself, cracked wide open under the weight of the numbers on that screen. There was no story left to spin, no excuse left to offer. She opened her mouth once, then shut it again. No sound came out. The woman who once filled every room, with her voice now sat frozen, staring at a screen she could not argue with. The board called for an immediate vote. 10-0, Genevieve Sinclair was removed as CEO, effective that same afternoon. The very system she'd trusted to catch every mistake had just recorded her biggest one, time-stamped and undeniable. The following Monday, Xavier Thorne walked back through the front doors of Etheris Systems on Montgomery Street. Morning light spilled across the marble lobby floor, warm and golden. He kept his chin level, his steps slow and calm, his eyes forward. The new chairman himself apologized to him in the lobby, shaking his hand in front of the whole reception desk. Several engineers gathered near the elevators, clapping quietly as he passed. Xavier nodded once, a small smile at the corner of his mouth. Xavier accepted a new title that morning, Director of Global System Oversight, reporting straight to the board. He signed the paperwork with the same steady hands that had rewritten 40,000 lines of code just weeks before. His new office had a wide window facing the bay, bright and open, nothing like the cramped corner by the air vent. It came with a 50% raise and full flexibility, so he could pick Brianna up after school every single day. He hung both Stanford diplomas on the wall that same afternoon, straight and centered above his new desk. He set Brianna's photo on the corner of his desk, right where he could see it while he worked. No more hiding in a corner nobody noticed. His first decision as director was simple. He promoted Tasha Higgins to deputy lead of his systems team. She cried a little when he told her, then laughed at herself for crying. His second decision came just as fast. Every engineer now had a guaranteed 24-hour response window for flagged emergencies, no exceptions. No urgent report would ever sit ignored in an inbox again. The engineering break room got a small metal plaque near the coffee machine. It marked the exact date of everything that happened, a quiet reminder of what real dedication looked like in that building. Engineers paused to read it every morning while their coffee brewed. Xavier still packed Brianna's lunch every morning, turkey sandwich cut into 4 triangles. He still fixed her broken toys at the kitchen table, patient and slow and calm. He glued the plastic horse's leg back together. That same week, careful and slow. Some things, he decided, were never meant to change. Brianna kept that little horse on her nightstand, crack and all, right where she could see it every night. Months later, Xavier stood at a podium at Stanford University, invited to speak at a spring engineering event. The auditorium lights felt warm against his face, familiar somehow after all those late nights alone. He looked out, over rows of young faces, some nervous, some eager, all listening closely. A few students in the front row leaned in closer, phones down, fully listening now. Xavier gripped the edges of the podium and let out a slow breath before he continued. He spoke about his late wife and about Brianna. He spoke about every quiet person who keeps complex systems running while the world sleeps. His voice stayed calm, steady, sure of itself. The value of any company, he told them, lives in the people who build its foundation. He paused, not the ones who talked the loudest in the corner office. The room stayed silent, then rose together in applause. After the talk, a young woman waited by the stage, notebook clutched her chest. "I want to build things like you someday," she said, a little shy. Xavier smiled and shook her hand. "You already are," he told her. "Just keep showing up." She nodded, eyes bright, and walked off toward her friends. Somewhere back in San Francisco, that small metal plaque still hung by the coffee machine, catching the morning light every single day. And every single day, someone new stopped to read it.